What's good, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Hockey on the Spot with Brandon Barenfeld. I'm Brandon Barenfeld. Thank you for joining. This is episode 23 of Hockey on the Spot, and today I'll be continuing with the 30 teams in 30 days for the entire month of August. And today we're going to take a look at the Tampa Bay Lightning. Very interesting offseason for the Tampa Bay Lightning after a very terrible year. A year where they started 6-1-0 and were the best team in the now extinct Southeast Division for a little while. They struggled after that. They absolutely struggled after that. They went 7-16-1 after that great 6-1-0 start, which caused the firing of head coach Guy Boucher, or then head coach Guy Boucher. And then former Syracuse Crunch / Norfolk Admirals coach John Cooper was called up to be the full-time head coach, but they did not thrive any better with him as their head coach. They only went 4-8-3, and not to mention in their last 10 games, they were the second worst team in the National Hockey League as far as the last 10 games go. They had the second worst last 10 games record at 2-6-2. Only the Nashville Predators had a worse record in the last 10. And for the Lightning, as far as the overall season went, in a lockout-shortened year, they ended up, despite their terrible season, they actually were not the last place team in the Southeast Division. The Florida Panthers were, but the Lightning weren't that much better. They finished 18-26-4 for 40 points, including losing their last two games. So not a season to remember for the Tampa Bay Lightning. But lucky for them, because of their bad season, they were rewarded with the third overall draft pick after finishing 28th overall in the league as the third worst team. But it wasn't their offense that was the problem here. Their offense was actually one of the best in the league, and Marty St. Louis and Steven Stamkos were the two leading scorers in the National Hockey League. St. Louis with 60 points, and also the oldest player to win the Art Ross Trophy. And then Stamkos with 57 points, also 28 goals. So their offense wasn't the problem. They had one of the best offenses in the National Hockey League. The main problems were their defense. Their defense is way too slow, and their goaltending was probably the biggest problem of all. They have not had consistent goaltending in a very, very long time. Not since Nikolai Khabibulin have they really had a consistent goaltender. And it's a shame for a franchise that has a Stanley Cup on its resume. Last season, at the beginning of the year, they bought in Anders Lindback in a trade from the Nashville Predators in the hopes that he would be their starter. Big 6'6" goaltender. He had a great start, but he wasn't getting it done, and Matthew Guerin wasn't helping either. And then at the trade deadline, they made a big trade with the Ottawa Senators, sending their top rookie Corey Conacher to the Ottawa Senators along with a fourth-round pick. And they got in return. They got big 6'7" goaltender Ben Bishop, and he was okay, not great. After doing very good in Ottawa to replace Craig Anderson, he did not do good in Tampa Bay, even though he did have the majority of the starts when he did come over. But now Matthew Guerin is gone, and one of those guys is going to have to step up. They have the tallest goaltending tandem in the National Hockey League. Lindback at 6'6", Bishop at 6'7". One of those two is going to have to step up. Right now, they do not have a legitimate starting goaltender. But again, luckily they did get the third overall pick, which Steve Yzerman would use to select the nifty left winger Jonathan Drouin from the Halifax Mooseheads. Jonathan Drouin, of course, was the leading scorer of the entire Quebec Major Junior Hockey League. He led the Halifax Mooseheads with 41 goals and 105 points, and also had a good at a lot of points in the playoffs as well. He was very, very good in the playoffs. Even though he's only 5'11", 186 pounds, he's going to be a great player. He was the first 2013 draft player to sign an entry-level deal. He signed a 3-year entry-level deal with the Lightning. Um, and this is a guy who is, though he can score goals, he's mostly known for his hands and his playmaking abilities. This is a playmaker who, for at least for the start of the year, will probably play on the top line with Steven Stamkos and Marty St. Louis, and he's going to feed both of them very well. He really is. Steve Yzerman had been a big Jonathan Drouin fan for a long time, so. And because of the kind of season he had compared to the kind of season that Nathan MacKinnon had, many will often wonder who's going to be a better player in this league: Jonathan Drouin of the Tampa Bay Lightning or Nathan MacKinnon of the Colorado Avalanche. It'll definitely be which one will be better. That it will remain to be seen. And will Alexander Barkov of the Florida Panthers be better than both of them? Will Seth Jones of the Nashville Predators be better? We'll see. It's going to be a very interesting situation. And Lightning obviously hoping that Drouin will be the best. And because if he is, that'll be a big steal for them, for sure. The Lightning, but that wouldn't be the only splash the Lightning would make. They also brought in a couple of additions to their coaching staff. Rick Bowness, who was hired as an assistant coach, he'll bring some foundation and stability to the back end. And then they also brought in the former University of Denver head coach George Gwizdecki. He'll be an assistant coach. Rick Bowness, an associate. He'll be in charge of the forwards and the power play. So that's really been the main focus for the Lightning this season. They didn't do too much as far as players go. They did have a few losses. One of them, the most really significant. Goaltender Matthew Guerin is still an unrestricted free agent, but he will not be back in Tampa Bay as they're now in a position where they have to trust their two tall goaltenders, or one of them. But they did also have some other losses. Defenseman Brendan Mickelson, he went to the Pittsburgh. He's gone. He's now a member of the Pittsburgh Penguins. Right winger J.T. Wyman, who was one of their better American Hockey League players, he's now a member of the Colorado Avalanche. And then left winger / right winger Benoit Pouliot, who actually was playing on their top 6 at points during last season and was solid for them. He's now a member. He goes over to the New York Rangers. However, those aren't very big losses. However, the biggest loss of them all, but one that was intended, the loss of veteran center, former 1998 first overall draft pick, franchise player, and former captain, Vincent Lecavalier. Vinny Lecavalier had 7 years remaining on what was initially a 14-year deal that was signed by the Tampa Bay Lightning. After scoring 70 points in 2009-2010, his numbers continued to drop with each passing season. And last year was one of his worst. He had only 10 goals last year, and he was basically a non-factor. So because of that, plus with a lot of the youngsters coming up, Steve Yzerman would use one of his compliance buyouts to buy out the last 7 years of the former captain and franchise player. He has a franchise high 383 goals. They'll definitely miss that. Former Rocket Richard Trophy winner back in 2007. Led the league with 52 goals that year. That was Vinny's best year. But now he is gone. Now no longer a top line center, now more of a second line center. He is gone. He signs a big 5-year deal. Almost instantly after being bought out, he goes over to sign a 5-year deal with the Philadelphia Flyers. So they'll definitely miss the players for sure. Will definitely miss him. They'll definitely have to find somebody to replace him as their new captain, and that'll be interesting to see. Um, and so with the loss of Lecavalier, they really the only replacement they really needed was to sign a second line center. That's really all they needed. So they didn't have too many additions. They only had really one true addition. They had two others, but they're not very significant. Jeff Walker coming over, a good move for the American Hockey League, played for the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins the past few years, and then defenseman Drew Olson, who former University of Minnesota Duluth defenseman, coming over from uh, the Columbus Blue Jackets system. So those two guys, excellent additions for the Miners. But the only true move that the Lightning really made this offseason, they signed center/left winger Valtteri Filppula to a 5-year contract. Filppula coming over from the Detroit Red Wings. The Red Wings did not have the room to sign him back with the arrivals of Stephen Weiss and Daniel Alfredsson, as well as re-signing a bunch of their own guys. Yzerman, a guy very familiar with Filppula from playing with him in Detroit, being very close friends with him, he signed him. And he's basically going to be the second line center now with Vinny Lecavalier gone. He will replace him as in the second line center role. But he is not anything like Vinny Lecavalier. Nowhere near as good. He is good, but he's not as good. Are they expecting him to be as good? No. Vinny Lecavalier is an offensive player, and this team is loaded with offense. Val Filppula, though he can put up some significant numbers, he's more of a defensive forward, and that's what the Lightning need. They needed a defensive center who can provide a little bit of offense. So Val Filppula, at least for now, is going to provide the role of being a second-line center, also a guy who wins a lot of face-offs. But he can also play wing, so don't be surprised if we see him at wing at some point, if they maybe go out and get another center. It had been believed at one point, and somewhat is still believed, that the Lightning had been in on a guy like Mikhail Grabovski, which actually would be a good move for them. It would give them some more depth at center, but that doesn't seem likely to happen. For now, Val Filppula will be the second-line center, but it is a great move for the Lightning. Again, it's a 5-year deal. They got him for a while, and it is a guy who could definitely fit Steve Yzerman's system. Which leads us to a couple of the questions. Which leads us to a bunch of questions for the Tampa Bay Lightning. Will their offense continue to be powerful without Vinny Lecavalier and with Valtteri Filppula? Honestly, I think it will. Their forward core is absolutely loaded. Again, Stamkos, San Louis, and Drouin, that'll probably be the top line. Filppula, Teddy Purcell, and Ryan Malone, that'll probably be the second line. And then, but it's at the bottom six where we start to have a few questions. In the bottom six, they have a lot of options, but a guy like Nate Thompson or a guy like Tyler Johnson, who is probably ready to make the NHL full-time, he's probably a good candidate to be the third line or fourth line center. Richard Panik, another strong prospect, I think he's ready to play. And then a guy like Alex Killorn, who they have had their eye on for a very long time. He came up last year, played very well. He's going to come up this year and play very well. And then, of course, Nate Thompson, B.J. Crombie, and Tom Pyatt. That'll probably be the fourth line with Dana Tyrell as the 13th forward. So they don't have any problems up forward, but also guys like Brett Connolly and Vladislav Mesnikov could also play. It's on defense where they have the problems. Victor Hedman is good, but that's really the only consistent defenseman they really have on their roster. Matt Carl was not very consistent last year after being very consistent with the Flyers. Sammy Salo, he's not getting any younger. Eric Brewer's not getting any younger. And then Keith Auley is really, after being a highly sought-after player, is now becoming more of a seventh guy. They have a couple of youngsters, though, that could definitely play next year. Andre Suster, a big 6'8", 225-pound defenseman, kind of a two-way defenseman. He's definitely capable. And then the big surprise of last year, Radko Gudas, he definitely will be on the team next year. So it's definitely going to be interesting. Another question, who's going to be the Tampa Bay Lightning's next captain? You definitely one could definitely assume a veteran like Marty St. Louis, or veterans like Marty St. Louis, Sammy Salo, or even Eric Brewer. But honestly, my personal opinion, I think Steven Stamkos will be the next captain. He's young and he's a sniper, former first overall pick from 2008, and he's a leader. He's becoming a leader on this team. He's learned a lot from Vinny LeCavalier, and I think he could definitely be ready to take that kind of a position. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see who's going to be the captain. Another big question, who's going to be the starting goaltender? Will it be Ben Bishop or will it be Anders Lindback? That remains to be seen. The stat sheets show that Ben Bishop will probably begin the year as the starter, but anything could change. Either way, their goaltending is not very strong at all, despite how tall it is. One of these two stand-up goaltenders need to be at the top of their game for this coming year. And probably the biggest question of all for me, like the Florida Panthers, how will the Lightning flourish when they have to make daily trips up to northeastern America and northeastern Canada? They no longer have to make daily trips up to Winnipeg, which is good, but at the same time they lose the ability to make daily trips up to Washington and Carolina, which was close. Though they still make daily trips up to Sunrise to play their arch rivals, the Florida Panthers. Like the Florida Panthers, they have to make daily trips to Buffalo, Boston, and Detroit, as well as Montreal, Ottawa, and Toronto, and that's going to be tough on them. That's going to be equally as tough on them as it is on the Florida Panthers, and a lot of the youngsters might not be ready to handle that kind of travel. So that's going to make this season even harder for the Tampa Bay Lightning this year. Okay, guys, let's take a look at the top prospects for the Tampa Bay Lightning. To me, looking at this, they've always been a team that's had one of the deeper prospect pools, and they do. They absolutely have a deeper prospect pool than both the Ottawa Senators and Montreal Canadiens. It's along the level of the other teams, of Boston, Buffalo, Detroit, and Florida. It's definitely along that level, maybe a little more impressive than Florida. But of course, Jonathan Drouin, no doubt the top prospect. Andrei Vasilevsky, a goaltender. He's number 2. He could be a good goalie for them in the future. Nikita Kucherov, another Russian. He's on there. Vladislav Nemesnikov, who was one of their top prospects last year. He got demoted a little bit, but he's still good. Andre Palat. But the one guy on this list that has always impressed me, no doubt, is their number 5 prospect, center Tyler Johnson. Only 5'9", 182 pounds, an undrafted free agent signing from 2011, former Les Cunningham Award winner as the AHL's most valuable player. That was last season. This guy is at nothing but absolute speed. Speed is his game, and he's going to be a very good player in the future. He absolutely is. Former Spokane Chiefs star in the Western Hockey League, scored a lot of points in that league. He's going to be very good. Now, the player on this team that has to be good in order for the Lightning to be a playoff team, no doubt about it, has to be one of their 2 goaltenders, Ben Bishop or Anders Lindback. One of those 2 needs to step up this year in order for the Lightning to be a playoff team. Their goaltending is among the most inconsistent. They were among the teams that gave up the most goals last year, so that team, their goaltending definitely needs to be better for this season. Overall, are the Tampa Bay Lightning a playoff team? They have inconsistency on defense and inconsistency in goal, and the travel time is just too ridiculous for them, just like the Florida Panthers. So because of that, I'm going to say no. Not this year. It's going to be a development year. All right, guys, that'll do it for episode 23 of Hockey on the Spot. Join me again tomorrow when we conclude our new Atlantic Division tour with the Toronto Maple Leafs. So until then, this has been Hockey on the Spot with Brandon Barenfeld. I'm Brandon Barenfeld, and tune in tomorrow. Have a great day.